Welcome race fans back to TRTM for tonight's coverage of round 10 of VSR Phoenix Season 8. As always, I'm Ricard and you join us from the former home of the French Grand Prix at the circuit Paul Ricard. Founded in 1970 with this particular layout appearing in 2005, Paul Ricard is widely regarded by many in the GT community as a polarising venue. Love it or hate it, that doesn't detract from how curiously designed this circuit is. After extensive overhauls at the turn of the millennium, Paul Ricard boasts 13 turns and 3.5 miles of FIA Grade 1 in this current configuration, with upwards of 6 available configurations for a multitude of disciplines, formerly hosting, of course, the Formula 1 French Grand Prix up until 2022, but also hosting the European Le Mans Series, the GT World Challenge, the FIM Endurance World Challenge Bold Door 24-hour, and FFSA GT races to the current day. Watching with the grid then, as we are but moments away from the start of qualifying, and what an interesting last week it has been, reflecting on those results back in the circuit Monza. I mean, it was a jaw-breaking result there for Just Boris. It was a perfect pole to win run for the previous time champion, looking to be two-time champion as he now narrows the gap to around 37 points, making up a 50-point leap since round 9. We'll get more onto the touch of the division standings very, very soon. We're only a few seconds away then from the start of qualifying today. I must point out as well, it was a curious result indeed for wishful winnings. You can see in the paddock there in the number 23, who surfed the chaos of Monza to give us another podium finish. So at the start of qualifying, let's get on board with one of our leading drivers out of the gates then. As you can see, it's a very wild start for our drivers getting out onto the circuit. We're on board with Just Boris then to discuss qualifying predictions. Looking in the quality predictions, you find that the Doctor is back in office. White Doctor predicted at pole position at 1:53.525. That's 0.2 of a second ahead of Just Boris's time of 1:53.742. Tyler Vermack only about 103 thousandths away. That makes a very narrow margin, but not anywhere near as narrow as some of the margins further down the line. Tommy in the top 5 there. Wishful Winnings making a second week in a row top 5 appearance with a 1:54.085 by Tommy, a 1:54.107 by Wishful. VSR Chris and VSR Antion separated by only 7 thousandths of a second from 6th and 7th position in predictions. And there are also notes the appearance of our first silver driver inside that order for this round in particular. Right behind Grizz then, right behind Antion I should say, is VSR Grizz, another silver driver, and VSR Otzi, another silver driver, all predicted inside the top 10, a 1:54.470 and a 1:54.645. Rounding out our top 10 then was a driver on only a 3/10th gap to pole position last week, Soviet Mario in the gold category, a 1:55.102. On to the talk of balance of performance. You can see it's a story of polarising differences then, with the extremes on both sides of it. 10 kilograms won or lost by any one manufacturer. It also marks the second week in a row Porsche has been the brand to be in terms of balance of performance. They're joint with Lexus for the most weight lost in this round. 10 kilos for both the 992 and the RCF. The Ferrari 296 losing 5 kilos, Audi losing 4, BMW losing 1, Lamborghini on screen here at the moment, courtesy of the number 999 of Just Boris, last week's race winner and consecutive race winner for the last fortnight of racing we've seen in this series, only on the neutral. Same story for McLaren. Mercedes gaining 1 kilo, Aston Martin gaining 10, and Ford gaining 10 just all the same. Looking into the division standings as we're on board with Just Boris over the course of his first flying lap. Times will be available from the top left. We'll get onto the timing charts before the end of this lap. Starting us off in gold, as we mentioned, a 37-point gap now between White Doctor, still in the lead of the championship, but for how much longer now? Of course, he's back into this race, so he's got a point to prove. He's got a championship still to fight for, but with rumours of a sudden and unanticipated is the better word for it, absence from next week's race at Valencia could throw his championship tenure into jeopardy and could give the green light for Just Boris to become our second ever multiple time champion and first ever consecutive champion in VSR Phoenix. Right now, that gap at 37 points. Not too far away then. In joint third is Soviet Mario and Blue Frog. Soviet relishing in yet another podium finish. And that's his third in a row, as a matter of fact, heading into this round in the championship. Blue Frog has been on a real warpath, and only 5 points behind the pair of them. Gunning for a podium in gold is Tyler Vermack in the number 94, now the number 835, Aston Martin. Then further behind is Tommy, Chris MCK08, Wishful Winnings, Elite Cassie, ETE Giles, Queese and VSR Chris. Into the silver category, you can see it's only in and around a 6-point gap at the moment. Very, very close now in favour of Grizz, more so than Otzi, especially after last week's calamity at Monza down the opening straight, where we saw a collision between Audi Pete, Tyler Vermack and VSR Otzi. The three sent into a dead spiral with even more collateral picked up with drivers trying to get around them over the course of the race last week. Tommy Johansson has had phenomenal progress in the number 71 to make his way to the podium in division. Could be gunning for a seat in gold come season 9. Just Boris to the line then as we bring up our timing charts on the left-hand side of our screen there, trying to work with limited number of hands as he puts in a 1:54.495. We'll see where the next times come from. The number 98 across the line in just a moment's time there. The 96 I should have said, which was Twiglet in the AMG. No, the number 98 was actually the number 98. Elite Cassie, sadly, though, wasn't validated. VSR Antion just crossed the line there. A second off the beat in the number 1 Ford Mustang. We'll be on to the discussion of bronze in just a moment's time here as we see the first of our flying laps make their way onto the timing charts here. And track limits really seems to have been a point of contention for our drivers today. This does not seem to be the easiest of track to master now, whether or not that's just by design or whether or not the track limits haven't been properly coded in. You can see that there are 2 sets of white lines on either side of those rumble strips. It really does depend on what the game considers and doesn't consider to be within track limits. Right now, though, Just Boris still on provisional pole after the first run of laps there. Not a single driver has yet to break that second barrier. You can see Otzi now 3rd, Twiglet 4th, Funky Fish provisionally 5th, and then VSR Abbott provisionally 6th there in the number 27 as he crosses the line for the first time. 15 minutes left to go. We'll get on board then with the 999 as it looks to be a potential extension of time for Just Boris there over a 1:54.495. Tyler Vermack brings it to within a 10th of a second. That is a screamer by the South African talent in the 835. 900ths of a second. He's feeling very, very confident coming into today's round. We see VSR Chris also break the toe of the second barrier there as he too gets within a second. 0.6 of a second there for Aston Martin, number 28. It could be a very confident or confidence-inspiring round for Aston Martin. The 835 and the number 28 setting a very early precedent here that they could be second best on the field to Lamborghini. But is it a question more so of man or machine? We see here with Boris getting across the line. It's definitely man as he puts it from 900ths to a 0.7 of a second. But I am left with my jaw agog to say that even that was not a ceiling that could not be shattered by Aston Martin. The number 54 of White Doctor absolutely decimates that time and puts 2 temps on top. That is insane stuff already. This could be for a very unexpectedly exciting qualifying shootout on our hands. Blue Frog crosses the line 4th fastest then, sandwiched in between the Astons towards the back of the top 5. You can see Aston Martin 1, 3 and 5 right now. The only other Aston Martin we're waiting to see here, Tommy Johansson, currently 11th, could break a top 10 time there. It's only 0.4 of a second between himself and VSR Funky Fish in 10th position. Otzi there crossing the line now ahead of Blue Frog and pushing Chris out of the top 5 to make McLaren's first appearance inside the top 5 in this qualifying session. Otzi looking very, very strong indeed. The only other McLaren on track at the moment, we'll have a talk about it as well, is Shawnee Mack, as he has shown great progress not only during last round at Monza but also during his tenure in the Bronze Championship. We'll be discussing that in a moment's time. Here he's across the line and 12th fastest. So onto the topic of the bronze standings. Now, we mentioned how the gaps were thin in gold and silver, and that is a sentiment carried even further into bronze. A 26-point gap in the Bronze Championship between Abok and Jayco. Now, this is for Premier seating of the silver category come Season 9. And you can see that VSR Smiler makes the podium positions there by 4 points away from second. But you can see as well Shawnee Mack on screen at the moment. Yes, he had a bit of a troubled start at Watkins Glen at the start of the season, but right now, as we're past the midway and into the final 4 weeks of racing, with this being the start of it, he finds himself 4th in the championship, so he's in that top 50%. So that, I would definitely say, you can consider is measured progress there by Shawnee Mack. He's not too far away from being on the podium in bronze, and typically the top 3 positions are the ones that get the most consideration coming into silver. So definitely could be some broader horizons, some greener pastures on the way for the number 4. Here's hoping. Seeing up front though, Just Boris did bring the gap down to within a tenth of a second, but is still playing second fiddle at this stage of qualifying to White Doctor. What is going to be the plotting there behind the wheel of the 999? Now we have seen masterclass after masterclass after masterclass for qualifying performances by Just Boris. It is very, very tough to defeat him on quali. And he's met his match in the form of White Doctor. He seems to have been the antithesis of Boris's performance. He has been everything that Boris isn't in this championship, and vice versa. These two, the two different sides of the same coin. And really, that has been fascinating to watch. Now, you know, they speak very highly of rivalries throughout the world of motorsports. I mean, you can really pick your fights here. You know, your Verstappen and Hamiltons, your Vettel and Alonso's, your, I'd say, Schumacher and Häkkinen's. I mean, those are just Formula One. I could go on and on with that, but really some of the most prolific rivalries there are from drivers that are so close yet so far away to one another in terms of how they play this. What you end up with is two drivers effectively cancelling each other out, and that's what gives you these fantastic gaps in qualifying, and more so could elevate it to an even more fantastic race on the horizon. 10 minutes left to go then, and we'll see where things go. Will it be in the way of Aston Martin, or will it be in the way of Lamborghini? You can see, though, it's two Astons on the podium positions and making up the first two rows. Actually, as a matter of fact, the first three rows of this race feature an Aston Martin V8 Vantage, courtesy of VSR Chris, who works his way past Otzi and back up to the top 5 in his last lap just gone. So let's catch on board with some drivers making their way around the track here. We can see with Just Boris on what appears to be a neutral lap. We'll be following him then for a tour around the circuit Paul Ricard. This particular variant, of course, introduced in 2005, is without the Mistral chicane featured on the French Grand Prix. Staying on board then with Just Boris. Let's get a comprehensive tour here as we are heading down to the final corners on track of the circuit Paul Ricard. Now we're making our way here to turn 13 at the Virage du Pont. You see Boris slowing down, strategizing here, trying to give himself as much free space as possible on his way down the pit straight, down towards the first set of corners here. Turns 1 and 2 coming up very quickly is La Verrière. Now it's a bit of an odd corner indeed. It's off camber, and it is a very odd corner geometry. You can see starts on camber, then moves to off camber past the apex at turn 2 of Verrières. On its way out then up towards turns 3 through 7 in a very complicated section of this track, starting us off at the Virage de l'Hôtel. Then to the Virage du Camp, coming up here. Virage du Camp, depending on who you ask. And then the Virage de la Sorbonne at turns 6 and 7. And Le Col, turn 7 there to bring us to the Mistral Straight. Just about, if I'm not mistaken, about 1.1 kilometres, if not a little bit more so over that of FIA Grade 1. A lot of slipstream racing to be anticipated then, make no mistake of that. We're in for a almost mirror match of what we saw back in Monza. A lot of drivers front to rear, especially in this section of the track. Straight line speed will also play a role. Maybe not so as much as what we saw at the Temple of Speed last Wednesday, but do keep that in the back of your mind there as we go heading into the Curb de Sang at turn 8 here. A very fast right-hander. Our drivers will have to give it 110% there, the full Sterling Moss. You can see the track limits guiding us back in then to Le Bousset at turn 9. The very site of Charles Leclerc's crash at the French Grand Prix during his battle for the, I believe, 2022 Formula 1 Championships. Then up through the Virage de Bendor at turn 10. Then to the Curb de Garlaban, turn 11. Here in Sector 3, a winding Sector 3 here to just bring us down slowly through the corners here, losing speed, losing more and more speed through the Virage de la Tour, turn 12, and then the Virage du Pont, where we started it all off at turn 13 to bring us to the line then. Will it be an improvement for Just Boris? You can see he's 9 tenths off on telemetry, but the telemetry is not always correct. He crosses the line there, and he absolutely was off by 9 tenths on the telemetry, so maybe it doesn't always lie. We can see some people chiming in chat as well. Wadenator, Smiler and Nico. Welcome to the chat as well. Lovely to have you on this fine evening of racing. Only 7 minutes then left to go in qualifying, and it's ticked by rather slowly, I must say. It seems to be a thing with French circuits, maybe owing to its history of endurance racing, that things are a lot slower and more methodical than what we had back in Monza. It seemed, by comparison, quite frantic and frenzied between our drivers last Wednesday for round 9 of the championship. we cut away from Just Boris to have a look at where some of the potential improvements may be emerging from. Look no further than our current pole sitter of White Doctor. The number 54 Aston Martin has been a sensational entry, mirroring that of Just Boris's entry last season to make a knockout performance. But with those sudden departures, his tenure of the championship and potential first championship on debut could be up for grabs by last season's champion Just Boris to make him not only, as mentioned before, the first consecutive champion, but the second ever multiple-time champion in VSR history. White Doctor then down through La Tour, turn 12, then to turn 13. Doesn't appear to be an improvement for the Aston, but you can see he did wind down a little bit through Sector 3, trying to conserve some heat in those tyres, and also trying to conserve tyre life here, because we are experiencing temperatures on track higher than what we had last week. Now, we thought that things were going to be definitely on the hotter side coming into last week, but we were astonished to see track temperatures hit in and around 30, if not slightly north of that. Now, it's the same story, much as if we've seen in the weather here in the commentary box in the UK. It is a scorcher outside, and it's mimicked here in the virtual world with north of 31 degrees centigrade on track. Is going to make a bit of bedlam for those Pirellis on board all of our cars. Pirelli P0 is really going to be up to the task for today's race. They've got an hour of racing in standard format ahead of them, and it has absolutely no sign of cooling down here at the circuit Paul Ricard. It could definitely be an interesting race for strategy. Of course, we're back to that standard one pit stop only, and I do expect to see that window come up a little bit earlier in this race, as definitely amongst the bedlam of the opening couple of laps is where we're going to see a lot of tyre-related issues creep in a lot earlier than the last couple of rounds, especially when one thinks back to Snetterton, where we had a bit of wet racing involved as well. So definitely keep that in the back pocket when thinking about strategy today. He is going to be wearing these tyres down, practically chewing the surface of them off at every single lap. See here with White Doctor, it has been a very brisk run already. With 5 minutes left to go, he's very wide out through Le Bousset though at turn 9. On his way to the Virage de Bandor. And through Garlaban, now to the Virage de la Tour. And you can see he's scrubbed a lot of that time away. He was up nearly 0.3 of a second, and now it's gone into the near positives from there. It could only be a few hundredths he finds improvement on, but that could be the deciding factor on qualifying today, as we've seen already time and time again just how razor thin things have been over the course of qualifying. Now it'll be under 1/10 of a second as he creeps his way to the line by 8 hundredths there, makes an improvement to a 1:53.560 by White Doctor. Very, very well done indeed by the number 54 Aston Martin. Speaking of Aston, here's another one of the Aston Martins. Tyler Vermack in the 835 is making his way currently out through the Virage de la Hotel towards Virage du Camp and Virage de la Sainte-Baume. Here in Sector 1, down towards Le Col at turn 7. Out through Le Col, down the Mistral straight then. And you'll see those dividing lines on track, the blue and red lines. It's one of the more prominent and striking features of the circuit Paul Ricard. You may be wondering what those actually do. Well, they play the role effectively of gravel in terms of being a runoff deterrent. And those blue lines are more fine, the red lines are more coarse. What it means is when the car gets sideways, they'll grab the surface of the tyre and massively slow the car down. It's this way that they can save on not only having to export tons of gravel to the site to be placed down on track, it also saves the maintenance of that gravel and replacement over the next couple of years. And this has definitely been a stylistic choice that has been made much more practical over the years, as that hefty amount of runoff is complemented by these coarse lines now, and it also just saves them from having to use tons of gravel, which can be on a lot of tracks not only a pain, but can also disrupt the race depending on how bad incidents get. So that's not to say that they're not going to use gravel at all. You can see there to the left hand side of Tyler Vermack as he makes his way around the Virage de la Tour. There is gravel present on track. They kept it to a minimum to help the flow of racing continue. Down across the line, that was a mighty improvement by Vermack, up to third, a 1:54.032 by the number 835. Aston Martin seem primed here. I've never seen a performance this comfortable since the wet rain started hitting the tarmac so many weeks ago at Snetterton, and even at the races before that as well. We saw very confident performances when temperatures were lower at the Red Bull Ring, the first sprint round of the championship. Looking around the field though to see where our next improvements could be coming from. Elite Cassie back in session as well. The return of the number 98 BMW, currently 8th in qualifying. BMW, though, they are coming back into this round of the championship in a bit of a mixed position, come to think of it, because they've only lost about a single kilo. It's not going to be an effect they feel so dramatically as their contemporaries at Aston Martin, Ford, Porsche and Lexus that are on the double figures for gain and loss coming into this round, but Cassie will just be able to slowly break himself back into the number 98 after his hiatus from the BMW in the last round at Monza. A pity as well, given that BMW seem to have pretty solid straight line speed. Now we'll wonder whether or not that comes back to benefit Elite Cassie in this round of the championship at this very section of the track. We'll stay on board though with Cassie, making his way just out of the Curb de Sang there. Went super wide, but you can see how those lines just cling to the car and they slow him down massively, guiding him back in the direction of the white lines. Very wide there out through Bendor, then to Galaban. We'll catch up with Cassie later on here. We quickly search around to see our next improvements. Very close to an improvement there. 10th position, the number 1 of VSR Antion. 40 seconds left to go though, so bringing our timing charts back up again to see where things stand. It is a 10th of a second gap between White Doctor and Just Boris, and with Just Boris remaining in the pit lane, he looks to be starting this session at the best of it on the front row in second. He's going to have to play more aggressively against the now defending White Doctor, looking to make up some of the time and points lost in the last round after his hiatus from the Monza round, subtracting 50 points from his championship lead from 87 down to 37. We'll get a look at the overall standings in our news segment as we get towards the grid at the end of qualifying today. And that really does bring us about the end of qualifying. 20 minutes up there and our final times ringing in. Tyler Vermack calls it quits there on his qualifying tenure. Aston Martin 1st, 3rd and 4th as it stands at the moment. Can any one manufacturer stand up to them besides Lamborghini? Let's find out. VSR Otzi is on his way into Sector 3 as we speak. He's out through Le Bousset and now down the Virage de Bendor at turn 10. Really, the major action spots on this track are going to be in that opening sector and then on our way out of turn 8 into Le Bousset at turn 9 as we start the ending of Sector 2 and into Sector 3. The 56 there, I believe it was, just called it quits on that. Otzi to the line then from 9th position, stays there at the end of qualifying. We'll quickly catch on board then the number 28. VSR Chris had a lightning qualifying with Aston Martin to be inside the top 5, but he calls it quits there and into the pit lane he goes. A lot of people have been saying we're going to be potentially seeing some accidental overruns of that pit lane. It is a very sharp entry, not the same one used in the French Grand Prix. This is a much more sudden one used in GT World Challenge. Our last 2 times then coming in from the number 4 of Shawnee Mack and the number 1 of VSR Antion. Let's see where they end up in what is a lower number than expected, especially considering where we were at the start of the season. North of 25 cars in the championship. We have only 16 here for Paul Ricard. As I mentioned, polarising circuit. Not a lot of people are particularly fans of the circuit Paul Ricard. I think that's owing to the fact that there are plenty of better French circuits out there in most people's opinions. I don't personally mind Paul Ricard, maybe not my particular cup of tea, but it is still a circuit that provides some fantastic battling nonetheless, especially up in the Grand Prix categories. Shawnee Mack then to the line from 16th. VSR Antion crossing the line there for 10th position at the end of qualifying. So, a bit of an interesting turn of fate then, especially for Aston Martin. Now, minus the time of Tommy Johansson, who starts this race in 14th position, you have almost all your Aston Martins there up in the top 5. White Doctor, Tyler Vermack and VSR Chris giving it a 1, 3 and 4 for Aston at the end of qualifying. Can they elevate that to a potential manufacturer's 1, 2? This is going to be a very interesting round to observe then firsthand. And we may as well start things off as we get towards our grid with the current recount of the full championship standings. Of course, we discussed division standings. You can see there, White Doctor 356 points ahead of Boris by 37 points in the championship. Soviet Mario and Blue Frog joint third with 259 points, only 5 points away from them. Rounding out that top 5 is Tyler Vermack in the Aston Martin with 254 points. Tommy in 6th with 241 points. Chris MCK in 7th position with 237 points. In 8th position, only 3 points off him, is Wishful Winnings with 234. Elite Cassie only 12 points away in 9th position with 222 points. Rounding out the top 10 is VSR Grizz with 194. And so on to the discussion of our news segment today, and we have a triple header for World Endurance Championship news. Of course, the first of which coming in hot off the plate from the recent successes by AF Corsa, who won the 2025 24 Hours of Le Mans. It was absolute victory then for the number 83 of Robert Kubica, Yiffier and Phil Hansen, who saw a bit of a downturn last season. Now elevate that to Ferrari's third consecutive Le Mans win since the introduction of the 499p. It was a fantastic race day for them, and they put absolutely everything into that performance. And then, still keeping on the subject of World Endurance Championship news, LMP2 regs have now been revealed for 2028, seeing not only the return of Orica and Gibson as our chassis and engine providers, but also the introduction of a second chassis provider, courtesy of Ligier. They'll be joining the lineup for what is appearing to be a slightly more diverse LMP2 regs by the end of the decade. And then our last bit of news, of course, McLaren revealing their hypercar project on the Le Mans race weekend. And this is looking to be an exciting one. It will be ran by United Autosports, the same team responsible for running the 720Ss at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which they didn't see awfully great success out of, all things considered. But despite that, McLaren said this unit will boast a twin-turbo V6 power unit. Now, this was after rumours had circulated during the promotional process that it could potentially use the same Judd 5-litre V10 or 5.2-litre V10 that we saw in the Solus GT, their limited run track car. However, this one will run a V6, much similar to their contemporaries at Ferrari. And so, bringing us out of the World Endurance Championship, we've got about a minute and a half before we go away on the formation lap. Two more bits of news, of course, one from Formula 1, being that George Russell won the Canadian Grand Prix amidst McLaren woes, where Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris very nearly crashed into one another. Lando Norris taking himself out of the Canadian Grand Prix after a collision with the pit wall. And then our last bit of news, the World Rally Championship reveals its chassis regs for 2027, revealing a new common body space frame chassis to replace the old FIA safety cell. This is in efforts to make things cheaper for Rally 1, with the price cap set at €375,000. So, recounting the grid for round 10 of the championship, and not a lot of time to do so. Starting up front then, White Doctor back to pole position with Aston Martin. The 54 starts ahead of Just Boris, dethroning his consecutive run of poles over the last fortnight of racing. On that third row is exclusively Aston Martin's Tyler Vermack and VSR Chris. Wishful Winnings inside the top 5 for the second week running. Blue Frog then in 6th with VSR Chris 7th, Elite Cassie in 8th with Otzi 9th and Antion rounding out the top 10. Twiglet behind in 11th in a very spry position for Mercedes and the number 96. They'll be starting much closer to the top 10 positions than last week. Audi P in 12th, VSR Funky Fish 13th, Tommy Johansson in 14th, Abog 15th and Shawnee Mack in 16th and last position. So we'll get on board then with the leading car, that of course being the 54 of White Doctor, to take us away on the formation lap for round 10 of the championship. It is going to be a very, very interesting race, especially considering that top 4, I would say. Aston Martin, this might be their strongest performance yet. We've seen plenty of strong performances by Aston Martin with their now outdated V8 Vantage from 2019. They've since added an Evo version, which was introduced, I believe, just last year with the facelift model of the Vantage following on from it. But that 2019 Vantage has really been firing on all cylinders for this round, and let's see where things go with an hour of racing yonder the horizon. Of course, strategy is going to be absolutely vital for this round, much like it was back at Monza. Tyre degradation is going to be at its highest all season long, over 30 degrees Celsius on track. It is not going to be particularly easy to keep nice, healthy tyres over the course of this race, especially for when the corners do show up. Unlike Monza, these ones are almost entirely rigorous, sharp, technical turns, complemented by long, open straights. In terms of straight line speed, keep a close eye on the number 61 Mustang back there. The Blue Frog's got the best straight line speed of any car inside the top 10. I think he's actually joint there with the number 98, the BMW of Elite Cassie, but he starts further down the order, so those two will really have to have quite a lightning first lap to be up in the charge for the top 5 positions. It is going to be a very competitive starting formation here, especially in that top 5. Looking down through the order, White Doctor, Just Boris, Tyler Vermack, VSR Chris, and Wishful Winnings. The Doctor is back in office then, and back on pole. Aston Martin, we know, are a very, very solid manufacturer when it comes to being the jack of all trades choice of machinery. Now, this thing, on its day, we've seen already, is an incredibly spry package, giving ample cornering and straight line ability, which has been enough to thwart the efforts of Lamborghini's Just Boris. Which I must say, Lamborghini was definitely the dark horse choice for Just Boris, especially after his dominant tenure with McLaren. Those of you asking what position Boris is there, you can see on the formation lap he starts from 2nd position. That is the Lamborghini swamped amongst a fleet of vantages there, being escorted down towards the turn 9, the Le Busset corner. The double Croix de Busset. I honestly don't know if that was pronounced correctly. That's why we're just going to say Le Busset from here on out. Don't speak French. So as we enter Sector 3 then, on what is going to be the formation process now, towards the latter part of this lap, an hour on the horizon here in round 10 of the championship, things could get very lively then. It's going to take a brilliant start to put Boris up into the attacking position for the lead of this race against White Doctor. In the same stroke, it's going to take a very solid start by the Aston Martin to keep the Lamborghini at bay, especially as we head into the more technical section of the track. Who does this go in favour of then? It's an old Western style quick draw at that front row between the pair of Just Boris and White Doctor. Who comes out on top down into Verrières at turns 1 and 2? Let's find out then as we're out through the Virage du Pont, turn 13, on towards the imminent start of round 10 of VSR Phoenix Season 8 here at the Circuit Paul Ricard. We are but moments away then, 16 cars, 8 either side of it, on our way down to the start-finish line here in Le Castellet. Without further ado, ladies and gents, we are green and racing here in Le Castellet, and as expected, a quick draw start there by Just Boris, trying to run it around the outside. He's already up and ahead of the Aston Martin of White Doctor. Is he going to have to try and attack down through Verrières? You can see covers the middle of the road on his way out through turns 1 and 2. Our leading pair already forming a gap from Chris and Vermack, who have swapped positions on that second row. The 28 now up to 3rd, the 835 down to 4th, as we head down into the turn 3 through 7 complex. Here at the Virage de l'Hôtel, then to the Virage du Camp. You can see Chris goes wide though in his fight with Vermack, has to rejoin alongside Blue Frog at the Virage du Camp. Does he hold his position? No, absolutely not. Now down through the Virage de la Saint-Baume at turns 6 and 7. It's Boris from Doctor, from Vermack, from Chris, from Blue Frog in the top 5. Wishful out to 6th. And as a matter of fact, could be down to 7th as we see the imminent arrival further down the line, as a matter of fact. Let's get a look here with Blue Frog chasing. There, you can see the orange BMW behind him is Elite Cassie. As expected, the straight line speed bullet cars have made their way firmly into the fight for the top 5. Brilliant stuff then, as we see nearly 3 abreast here from the perspective of VSR Chris in the fight for 4th position. Blue Frog holds his nerve. Chris loses out though, 2 positions, could be 3 there. Wishful Winnings emerging in the background now side by side with Grizz on the way down to Le Busset. A hectic start here in Le Castellet, but one to remember. And Wishful Winnings on the inside at turn 9. Could this be 3 positions for VSR Chris? It could be disaster for the number 28 Aston, and it is. I must say, what an exhilarating start we've just seen there. What a treat for a start like this. Let's get on board here. We can see towards the back of the top 10, VSR Funky Fish currently defending 10th position as GTR Twiglet and VSR Antion each take turns at having a go for the last of those top 10s. It's a 3-way fight here between Ford, Porsche and Mercedes at the back of the top 10. We'll have to get on board with some of those battles inside the top 5, as we can see that the 999 now leads this race, but by a very, very thin margin indeed. Down towards Verrières. Now we could even be seeing the fight for 9th position. Funky Fish does have a very solid first sector in that Porsche as he's slowly reeling in. That's the number 6 in front of him, VSR Otzi. who himself is with his silver championship rival VSR Grizz. Do keep an eye on those two if that gap gets any shorter. Twiglet, though, is absolutely marauding the back end of Funky Fish's Porsche. He's playing him an absolute fiddle here in the opening sector. So, you can see the top three very close to one another. The top five, same story still, but we're looking towards the back of the top 10 here with the Porsche. Down the Mistral straight. This is where he's at his most vulnerable. Porsche does not have beneficial straight line speed capability. They're not terrible for it, mind you, but they find themselves towards the back of the field when it comes to straight line speed. Not so much as McLaren, but they're the second worst for it. And Ford, you can see, is just gobbling them up. VSR Antion made light work of the Mercedes, now potentially to make light work around the outside. As you can see up ahead, Grizz and Otzi were side by side. Grizz still up ahead now of Otzi. Antion to the inside at Lebusset. You can see there, got over the curbs. The Ford did rotate quite harshly there on him, but he's managed to keep a very firm grasp on the wheel. The number one now up into 10th position. We're now fundamentally looking more at the defensive fight for 11th for VSR Funky Fish's Twiglet has got him in his sights. Same story for Audi Pete. He's being marauded here at the back of the top 10. Now outside of it, as a matter of fact, into the top 11. Twiglet, though, you can see he has got him absolutely dead to rights through turn 12. He's just sizing him up now for an overtake out of turn 13. The Virage DuPont gives rise to lap 2 of this race. We'll be getting on board with the top 5 in a moment's time, but let's see what plays out between Funky Fish and Twiglet in what has been an exhilarating start all round here in round 10 of the championship. Down towards Verrières we go. It's a 3-car fight at the moment. Antion, you can see, since getting the overtake, is just up and ahead, and it seems to be here, that little stab he gets just after Verrières on his way down to the Virage de l'Hôtel, he loses out. Everywhere else, the Porsche seems to be at least competent in that section of the track. It's got good rotation on the front engine Mercedes. Twiglet just knows how to work the weight on that AMG, and it's paying him absolute dividends in the first sector right now, where Porsche would naturally have advantage. Funky Fish is struggling under the heat. The tyres will be withering away very quickly now, even in neutral, arguably neutral conditions, more at your 20s for track temperature. Those tyres get absolutely chewed out on the 992. He is not going to be having a very nice day on tyres coming into round 10 in what are track temperatures north of 31 degrees. That's hotter than it was back at Monza last Wednesday. We'll be catching up with these guys in a moment's time. We get back up towards our top 5 here. As a matter of fact, just outside the top 5 as we're on board with Wishful Winnings. Now, he experienced a breakout not pole position, I should say, a breakout podium position last week, surfing the absolute bedlam at Monza, keeping his head low and out of trouble to find himself in a comfy 3rd position by the checkered flag. Can he do that again? Does lightning strike twice in the favour of the number 23? You can see he's giving it a very good go here in the fight for 5th position up against Elite Cassie, who I must say had a very remarkable start to the race. Same too as the one in front of him, the Blue Frog, now making 4th position. Watching on board then with Wishful, down to Verrières we go on the start of lap 3, 53 minutes left to go in this race. Out through turn 1 and 2. Right on the back end of the BMW now. He has to really play his cards correctly here, because the moment we get down to the Mistral straight, that swings quite heavily back in favour of the BMW, especially if the Ferrari manages to get up ahead. It'll be giving him basically free straight line speed in the form of that slipstream. Things getting a little bit wayward behind him as well. You can see now catching up to the fight was the one who started in that second row. VSR Chris looking for revenge then with Aston Martin as we exit turn 7. Down the Mistral straight we go then, and it's still very, very close, I must say. Ferrari defying the odds here to stay with BMW, knowing that this is their bread and butter being out in the open like this. But with the slipstream, he's right with him. He actually, yes, he will be pushing him down the Mistral straight. Bump drafting. Now, I didn't think I'd be able to see that with the desync problems that ACC has, but we are pleasantly surprised to see some NASCAR level antics here in VSR Phoenix. Just trying to shove the BMW along so that he makes a mistake there, carries a little too much speed for his own liking, and then he can strike very easily. It's a classic gambit we see in GT, and as a matter of fact in touring car racing more so than GT. Now it has become a three-man fight for 5th position. Cassie defending, Wishful and Chris attacking. Make no mistake, none of these drivers have the ambition to work with one another to benefit their race whatsoever. It is a free-for-all here from 5th backwards. And going for the inside of the Virage Dupont, he saw the gap and he absolutely went for it. Almost running into Elite Cassie there. Can we get that on the replay? That was remarkably close. Getting a look on the replays then as we head down out of the Virage de la Tour. And you can see there, just jolts it out right. Puts it on the inside. I don't think Cassie was expecting it. He did have to dive over the white line. So whether or not you would necessarily consider that pushing him off track is another story entirely. But Wishful did commit to the move. There was the space given before the apex. We can see a little bit of desync problems here. And it's not unexpected. We did have the same kind of problem bite us on the backside back in Monza last Wednesday. Fortunately, that should work itself out. Don't want to speak too soon on that. But we will catch up with these drivers later on. Actually, no, we won't, because you can see there, Elite Cassie was very nearly sideways with Wishful Winnings heading down the Mistral Straight. We're watching over the rear view of the number 23. As you can see there, the Aston Martin of VSR Chris, number 28, nearly alongside. You can see the moment he gets out into the side draft, he's pushed a little bit backwards there. The BMW's got slipstream off the Ferrari. It's a bit of a slipstream train here. Down towards turn 8 at the Curb de Sam. As a matter of fact, it could be dangerously close here for Wishful Winnings. This is something that he is dreading when it comes to fighting off the BMW of Elite Cassie, is getting out into these moments here where he's caught in the open. He's got no alibi, no ability to try and outrun the BMW. But fortunately, he's been given a line here on his way out of Le Bousset, because you can see stability seems to be a pressing issue for Elite Cassie's BMW. Now, is this a factor of the tyre heat all out of whack for the number 98, or is it a case where his setup is not particularly well tailored to his driving style? Now, we have seen that before. Of course, all the drivers will be doing their homework, and it doesn't mean any disrespect to suggest that. Sometimes we have seen it as well, where when push comes to shove and we're on racing load fuel, maybe the setup just isn't in proper form as it should have been. But that BMW, I must say, has really been stepping around, and it is getting very dangerously close to a spin out. Now let's get a look up inside our top 3 at the moment. We take a look then. Just Boris leads this race, but only by half a second to White Doctor. The Aston Martin still is within his ability to try and hunt down a race win, and more so try to extend that gap ahead of Just Boris, who brought things down by 50 points in the last round because White Doctor couldn't make it to Monza. We're 10 minutes in. And despite a leader change, I anticipate we could be seeing a second leader change very, very soon, because the Aston doesn't show any signs of slowing down. It's the Lamborghini giving it absolutely everything here. The 999, you can see, try as he may, push and shove, kick and scream. It's 0.5 of a second for the time being. Looking here, Tyler Vermack in a comfy P3. He's not going to be arguing with a healthy points haul from 3rd position. Looking in the Gold Championship standings where he resides in at the moment, he finds himself only 5 points away from being on the podium in the Gold Championship standings. And of course, that's because of the joint 3rd at the moment between Soviet Mario and Blue Frog, of which he is ahead of Blue Frog, and Soviet doesn't appear to actually be in this race at all. So regardless of what happens, Blue Frog appears to be winning this. But Tyler Vermack is definitely within his ability to leapfrog over the number 61, who is behind him right now on track, and take 3rd in the championship before we head to Valencia next week. And speaking of, let's just get a quick gander at the calendar here. Of course, we're here in the Circuit Paul Ricard right now on June 18th. On June 25th, we'll be in our last sprint round of the championship at the Circuit Ricardo Tormo in Valencia. And then the week after that, we'll be still in Spain, heading over to the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya on the 2nd of July. And then for round 14 the week after, we'll be in Johannesburg, South Africa, or more specifically Midrand, South Africa, for the Circuit Kyle Army round at round 14. Looking around the field then, we're back on board inside the top 10. We've left the top 5. We're outwards towards the wider top 10 positions here in 7th with VSR Chris out through Verrières as Elite Cassie goes wide at turn 1 and 2. Could it be a free position on the horizon? Not with a snap like that off of VSR Chris. Let's stay on board though with the number 28. Right now, as he fights for 6th position, it's very, very close indeed. See Oatsy there clawing into frame from behind. Antion as well. Grizz not too far away. We could find ourselves in potentially 4, upwards of 5's company, depending on how hard Cassie tries to fight this off. But Chris is alongside him, out of Le Col, down towards the Mistral Straight and the Curb de Sang at turn 8, all so far away at the moment. It's a drag race between BMW, Aston Martin and McLaren. Nearly a quarter of an hour into this race. We're going to look at the overall standings for this race in a moment's time. But you can see right now the nail-biting state of affairs for the fight of 6th position. It's so close, yet so far away for VSR Chris in the Aston Martin. Just having a slot back in behind Elite Cassie's BMW. Begrudgingly so, especially in the dirty air, because that's given rise to a move on the inside by VSR Oatsy. But can't make it stick. The Aston's just got more around the outside there in terms of momentum. Was able to keep the foot down and the car clear. Now out through Bendor, then Garlaban. The Virage de la Tour up next. Number 98 from number 28. It is close. It is very close indeed. Now, I wasn't expecting much coming into this round. I was expecting a little bit of the same out of what we saw in Monza. A bit more strategic-minded, fewer cars actually battling on track. But for the opening 15 minutes, I am delighted by what I see, and I imagine you two are at home. So down across the start-finish line, things are still close, surprisingly so, inside that top 10. Admittedly, it is now split into a story of 2 sides. The top 5 and the bottom 5, which we're watching at the moment here in the fight for 6th. Elite Cassie versus VSR Chris, though, there definitely might be the pressing matter that this could devolve to a battle for 7th, as Cassie seems to have found his footing. Oh my words, it's a spin out there for the Aston Martin down through the Virage de l'Hôtel at turns 3 and 4. It's all gone awry for VSR Chris. That is disastrous for the 28. One driver that won't be arguing with it whatsoever is going to be VSR Oatsy, but that has really got to sting there. Rotten stuff. VSR Antion, though, looks to take things even further in his new fight with Oatsy for the position previously held by the Aston Martin. The Mustang's up to 7th. Could he elevate that to 6th? Let's stay on board then with a brand new angle of this fight. That's a VSR Antion, who was an observer for some time, down from, I think it was about 9th position looking at it at the moment, but has now found the confidence to push 4th up past the front line and into 7th. Oatsy, though, you can see he's trying it consistently on the inside. He's got way more rotation to give in the McLaren. Now, in a side-by-side battle, he can absolutely use this to great effect to put pressure on his opponents. But when you've got momentum like Aston Martin and Ford, it is going to be a tough bridge to sell them. Towards the Virage de la Tour, turn 12. Antion from Oatsy. In the silver category, no less, as well. Really challenging the big boys in gold. Really, you've got to hand it to him there, because it has been lightning fast pace here since that spin out, as not only has he taken 1 position, he's taken 2 and may even take 3 here as he gets himself to the outside of Elite Cassie down to Verrières at turns 1 and 2. Oatsy could find this to his advantage. It can go any which way here in the fight for 6. Sliding out of turn 2 goes the BMW, the Ford and McLaren hot in pursuit. Now, this is fantastic stuff to see in the opening quarter. Bear in mind, we've still just under 3/4 of an hour left to go here at the circuit Paul Ricard, and what a treat it has already been. Maybe not anywhere near as chaotic as what we saw out of the endeavours at Monza, especially, dare I say, with that opening straight incident. Lest we forget, really, that was one of the big disasters of the championship there. That occurred between Audi P, VSR Oatsy, you can see there in the background of this fight. The third of 3 cars in the fight for 6th position, and with Tyler Vermack there, who tried to squeeze his way past, got his nose clipped off by the Audi, and it sent him and the fellow McLaren alongside, careening down the opening straight. Elite Cassie then has to slot back in behind the Mustang, is in the story of 2. 8 cylinders, proves to be better than 6 on its way down the Curb de Sang at turn 8. I must say, he's used that engine to great extent there. He's been playing to the strengths of the Mustang. He understands exactly where its limits are. Dare I say, this is a much broadly different Antion than what we saw last season. It has been a story of continual improvement, and this is really tactically minded by him. He is playing this like chess. He is not waiting around, waiting for positions to be effectively handed to him. He has been playing to within every possible strength that Mustang can give him. It's really been quite... Oh, no! Oh, no, 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 no! Oh, it's all gone awry. Commentator's curse strikes again, ladies and gents. Out through Garlaban, down to the Virage de la Tour. That's contact between himself and Elite Cassie. Let's get a look at what precisely went on. He's now out behind Otzi. But Elite Cassie is behind Otzi as well. So here, I think, yes, it was underpinning on the brakes by the 98. So you can see he's held off and let Antion back through since that. Let's just get a look at it again whilst we relocate to the car. Now up in 6th position, leading the fight. And that'd be VSR Otzi. You see there, he just underpinned the brakes and it was history from that point onwards. Oh my word. Well, the second major incident of today, and VSR Otzi now in premier control of 6th position. And you can see that is the physical gap on track. A little bit of desync problems there for Antion. Hopefully doesn't evolve into a disconnect. But you can see he appears a lap down and already having done his... No, there we go. Telemetry resolved. No disaster. No problem. No, don't even know there was an issue. What issue? No, it wasn't an issue. So looking around the field, you can see the fighting for Funky Fish hasn't ceased as he still finds himself in close proximity. But let's get a look here. What appears to be a reinvigorated fight for the lead of this race. Now we're watching on with the one defending the race lead at the moment, Just Boris, on his way out through the Virage de Bendor, turn 10, then to Garlaban at turn 11. Virage de la Tour and Virage du Pont turns 12 and 13 on the horizon here. White Doctor, though, you can see, is absolutely fired up and ready for this fight. Indeed. Let's get a look here very quickly with, yes, the attacking car of the two, White Doctor, as we go barreling out of turn 13. Now, this is as close as he's been since the race start. He's brought it to within half a second. On that last lap, he was 0.2 faster, or about 1/10 and 200ths if you want to be very specific. Down through Verrières, turns 1 and 2. Much earlier, more hesitant on the brakes than we saw at the start by Just Boris there, I must say. But he has snipped a lot of the momentum out of the Aston. I don't think White Doctor was anticipating that whatsoever. So having a look at our standings right now, Boris leads this race. White Doctor with the fastest lap is charging for the lead in his own respect. He was 7/10 out before we pulled the charts up, but he can absolutely reel that in. So we've seen already in the last couple of laps, he is the faster of the two in this decisive fight right now in the opening half. Tyler Vermack third, Blue Frog fourth, Wishful Winnings in the top 5. Otzi up to 6th after the incident between Antion and Elite Cassie. Elite Cassie, as a matter of fact, all the way down to 10th now. Antion 7th, Grizz 8th and Chris 9th. Audi Pete in 11th, Funky Fish in 12th, Abbott 13th, Tommy Johansson 14th, Twiglet 15th and Shawnee Mack in 16th position as we get past the first 20 minutes of racing. That gap now out to 1.1 seconds, so whatever it was Boris had tucked under his sleeve there has clearly emerged into the light. As now the Aston is struggling to keep pace. Down through the double car Debussy, Lebussy, as most people call it on the commentary tracks, at turn 9. Now towards the Virage de Bendor. We'll catch up with these two in a moment's time. We'll take a look behind them. There's Tyler Vermack out by 2.3 seconds. He isn't close enough to be in the fight for the race lead here, but if there is something that boils over between the two cars in front of him, which he's got very clear line of sight on, he'll be the first benefactor amongst them to take that presumptuous lead of the race. Speaking of Astons, we've got the number 28 here, VSR Chris. He had that spin down in Sector 1. Since that point, he's remained inside the top 10, but has got more present company from the 44 Audi. Audi as well have had quite solid progress, that they've got both cars inside the top 10. The 44 and the 77th, 9th and 10th as of right now, out of the Virage du Pont. Around the field then to see where our next fights could be coming from. You can see it is fairly close here between Abok and Twiglet for 13th position. That might be one to watch in a moment's time out of the Virage du Pont. Checking around then where the sort of white hot region of the battles were going on was towards that middle of the top 10. Antion looks to be getting closer to Otzi. There could be a fight on the horizon then between the pair of them. This has really been his opportunity to spread his wings and fly in that Mustang. I must say, it's one of the best performances we've seen from Antion all season. This is really where he's been able to play to his strengths with that Ford, and I think also, namely, based off of that balance of performance as well. Ford has been to such detriment over the course of the season. To only have 10 kilos on the Mustang, I think this has definitely played a lot nicer into his hands here. He's not been having to lug around upwards of 20 kilos plus over the course of the last couple of rounds. This is where the Ford has definitely been a lot lighter. We can see, though, it is yellow flags out at the moment, and it's for the number 98. It's Elite Cassie. Let's see if we can catch him here and see what had gone on. And, oh, no, I think I may be able to piece together the puzzle here, as that's heavy damage over the nose of the 98. He rejoins out of Ricard at turn 7. That could have been a snap out of turn 6, or it could have been contact, as a matter of fact, as he was dropping positions towards the back of the top 10. Something was clearly amiss, but I'd be willing to wager it was some kind of grip loss and spin out of his own accord. We saw he was already wrestling the controls of the BMW, and in very hot conditions indeed. It has not been an easy fight for the 98. He pulls it to one side here, and I believe, yes, pulling it to a salvage point. Elite Cassie may indeed be out of this race here at the circuit Paul Ricard. Reluctantly so on what was a fairly solid performance until the BMW is the one that failed him. It wasn't the driver that changed. We're back in the green flag conditions then on the sad remiss of the number 98. On with Blue Frog then. Comfortable in the top 5. Now it's easy and solid points at the moment. He will be worrying slightly about the Aston Martin in front of him, Tyler Vermack, who could potentially leapfrog his position in the championship. It's only a 5-point gap between the pair of them from 2nd to 4th, as a matter of fact, because Blue Frog is joint, not 2nd, sorry, 3rd and joint, 3rd and 5th, I should say, because he is joint 3rd with Soviet Mario. We can get the words out in the end. It just takes a while. Number 61 then down the Mistral straight, and just check on that telemetry to see, is he effectively reeling the Aston in? You can see by a few attempts there. It's once we get towards the latter half where we see any kind of pronounced effect for Ford, as he made up 0.2 of a second there over the course of the straight. And we may see a bit more of a dramatic version of that here, as much closer and in the slipstream is VSR Antion. Watching then with Antion for the potential fight of 6th position. Out through turn 8 then at the Curve de Sang. Into Lebusset at turn 9. Strategy will be creeping in now. We're at the 35-minute mark. It's usually at points south of this where we get to see our first pit stops. I do expect to see them a little bit earlier than the last couple of weeks, with the heat really stressing the tyres of these cars out. And we've seen already that it has cost some drivers their entire race today, the number 98 being among the first victims of it. We saw as well with the number 28 Aston Martin that the tyres on the back were just too hot to give any effective grip and cause that spin out. Playing it cool then, no pun intended, is the McLaren and the Ford in 6th and 7th position. In that last lap, by half a second, Antion was faster in the number 1. So we'll watch with them out through the Verrières curve, turn 1 and 2. We will quickly just open our wider screens here to see how close the Aston is. Not too far away at all. We'll be catching on board with them soon then, as we could be seeing a potential race lead change before the first of our pit stops. It could be decided on strategy today. I wouldn't put it out of the way for such an occasion. But given how close White Doctor and Boris seem to be, we could be seeing a slipstream fight very shortly. And the same story here for Otzi v Antion as we make our way out of turn 6. We're out through the Virage de la Sainte-Baume and Le Col at turn 6 and 7. Chris in the background there, our first of our spin-outs, is making his way back into the fight from 8th position. Right now, though, you can see he's caught firmly in the danger zone. The McLaren has absolutely nothing it can do there up against the Ford. 5.4 litres versus 4. On their way down Mistral. Now trying to get a little bit of a tag back almost on the slipstream there in the latter half of Mistral down through turn 8 of the Curve de Sang. This could be where the McLaren has an opportunity to strike back with sudden and unprecedented aggression. And there you have it, up on the inside. That was his move he was gunning for, but again, falls flat on its face. I have no doubt in my mind Otzi's going to go for this move one of these days, and it is going to work. He needs to just find the right time to do so. He plays things a lot more aggressively when he recently loses a position, and I think that does play in a little bit to how he keeps ending up in problems, especially in regards to tyres and overall pace after he loses a position out. It's a very common thing. Losing a position out can often lead to drivers pushing the envelope out to try and regain the position as soon as possible. You've got to play chess. You can't afford to play checkers. Maybe this is the opportunity then Otzi's been waiting for, back into the slipstream. Bear in mind, we'll also be covering the leading battle at the moment as that is getting closer and closer. The 999 and the 54 currently making their way out through the Virajdi camp in Sector 1, not Turn 1. We're at Turn 1 here, Turns 1 and 2, as a matter of fact, out of Verrières. And it's in sections of the track where geometry becomes a little bit strange and requires a little bit more of a ample centre of rotation, where the Ford starts to struggle. And it's where the McLaren, you can see there, night and day difference in terms of cornering capacity. The Ford has to opt for wider lines, throwing its weight around a little bit more, having to work with a lot more weight distribution there. Whereas the McLaren, it can almost flow through these corners. You can see the difference expressed in that opening sector. Right now, the number 71 and the number 982 are into the pits. That's Tommy Johansson and Funky Fish, our first pit stops of the day. We have 32 minutes left to go, just under, as a matter of fact. But here, in this back straight, is where the McLaren is absolutely powerless to the Ford. He needs to be within about 4/10 of a second of the Fords to be within a shout of even trying for a position at turns 8 and 9 at the Curb de Sang and Le Bousset. He knows he can follow in the dirty air of that Mustang and not suffer too much aero stall to keep right with him on his way down through the perilous run at Le Bousset, where it's very easy to get side by side, much harder still past the apex to keep it side by side. You can see now Oatsy's calmed down a little bit since he lost the position out. He's not trying too particularly hard to maintain a one specific gap. He's sizing Antion up now, and it's this surgical process that we get to see drivers slowly simmer themselves into. Of course, adrenaline, even in sim racing, is still at an all-time high for these drivers, and it is not too difficult to trick your own body into believing that. But there goes Antion into the pits. So playing things by strategy now, knows that he is potentially vulnerable if he stays on tyres for any longer. Brings it into the pits. Oatsy's going to opt for one more lap here, trying not to fall victim to the overcut, as he knows that gap could get even wider. Now bear in mind, Paul Ricard is one of the best circuits for strategy because it's the shortest among the pit lanes here in mainland Europe. So it makes these pit stops very short, very snappy. You can see Audi Pete there slotting in front of VSR Antion. The number 77 Audi and the number 1 Ford in the pit lane at the moment. You can see it won't take them long to get out. So you can see just over the bonnet here already is that pit limiter line just down the road. A very short run from start to finish, and it makes strategy very snappy and does often encourage drivers to play a little bit more aggressively despite the weather. We've seen that it is a real risk-reward system at the moment for these drivers. We're seeing here our leading pair, White Doctor and Just Boris, at the halfway mark of the race. Now, one does wonder who's going to pull the trigger first here for the pit stops. They're very, very short, but it's going to play a world's difference if they can get onto new tyres and start to cure them in for the next half hour of racing. They will have a much, much better advantage than the driver there over. It will take the same amount of time, as of course there are certain requirements to be met, including tyres and fuel for these mandated pit stops. It is not just the case of coming in up on the jacks, off the jacks, out. The stop and drop method was banned in quite a few leagues, this being one of them. You can see in goes to the pit lane White Doctor in the Aston Martin. So Boris will stay out in the lead of this race. Could there be an overcut strategy being thought up right now by the 54? Only time will reveal the answers. White Doctor on his way out of a very short pit stop indeed. He'll be losing out position though to Wishful Winnings, now up into third of this race. VSR Chris on the way as well, and the fellow Aston Martin. White Doctor then into the race. Was into the pits, I should say, my mistake there. So we want to try and catch on board with one of our recently pitted drivers. You can see they're very nearly contact between Abok and Tommy Johansson down through the Virage de l'Hotel. Blue Frog in the pits as well from inside that top 10. So things are livening up. As expected, earlier pit stops than last week with heat creeping in. Oatsy's also in, as to his Grizz, as potentially also no. Twiglet stays out on track with Mercedes and inherits 5th. Antion was one of the drivers we saw into the pits there as well in his fight against Oatsy. With Oatsy in the pits at the moment, this is his best opportunity to come and have a go at retaking the position off of the number 6. Not going to be particularly easy. You can see he's a ways down the road here. 28 minutes left to go. We're on board with VSR Antion as he rounds the Virage du Pont at turn 13. Is the strategy going to pay off? The number 6 is off its jacks and out of the limiter. So as it appears, the number 6 of VSR Otzi is back out on track and leading of that fight. So that has been a bit of a shocker for Antion. Otzi was behind him before he made his way into the pits, and now as the pit lane runs conclude between the pair of them, the McLaren finds itself out in front with nearly 5 seconds to spare. That shows just how broad the difference is. Boris is into the pit lane, so could we be seeing an exchange of the race lead? Into the pits, both Boris and Tyler Vermack. So let's see if we can catch on board with White Doctor, and you can see he's on the other side of the track quite literally as he makes his way down the Mistral straight. Could it be too far away for him to take the lead of this race? Boris is in on a bit of a bumpy run, dare I say, to his pit box there in the 999. This could be all to play for, and we did say there's a very solid chance the race could be decided on strategy today. Let's see what the strategy is for the 999. We'll quickly catch on board then with White Doctor. He's out through the Curb de Bendor, or Virage de Bendor, turn 10, then to Galaban. It may just be too late for him, as we saw in the fight between Otzi and Antion. It may just be too far away, but bear in mind, he started that pit stop first, and it's a very short run in, so it is going to be a very short run out. Contrastingly, White Doctor, though, is down at the opening straight, and the 999 has just started moving there towards the pit limiter line. You can see him exiting, and there we have it. Up into the lead of that fight goes White Doctor. He'll provisionally lead this race after GTR Twiglet pits. That was down to the wire between the pair of them. Now he has to make this absolutely count for him here. He started from pole position, is now, for the first time in this race, defending the lead. After a very swift loss of that lead down the opening straight, it was just the better of the two starts for the Lamborghini. That's been one of his textbook moves there, just Boris. He's really hot on the foot when it comes to those race starts. Very fleet of foot in the 999. But now he finds himself chasing tails here. The number 54 of White Doctor. The Aston Martin now in the provisional lead of this race, though technically in the lead of the race will be GTR Twiglet. A stop-go 30-second penalty for the number 28. VSR Chris, his race has gone from bad to worse here after that spin out. He'll be beside himself in the next 25 minutes on a race day to forget. Having a look around then, Abok and Tommy Johansson look to be getting pretty close for a fight here. Now we'll stay on board with VSR Abok as he leads the Bronze Championship ahead of Jayco 14. And Abok, we saw him last season with BMW, just like the story of Shawnee Mack and just like the story of Antion as well, who was himself a Bronze Series champion. It's been a story of real progress. You saw there that very quick move between Abok and Johansson. I'm pretty sure Johansson actually just let him past in the 71. That did look fairly deliberate. Not much more to cover on that front. Otzi looking to gain a free position then off of Chris with that stop-go 30-second penalty. Absolutely denting today's performance for Aston Martin's number 28. GTR Twiglet then, the only driver left on the field yet to have taken a pit stop. We'll stay on board with him here on the silver category. And one of the only Mercs left. It's quite a sad sight, to be honest, because the Mercedes is a grand machine. If this is the last of them, fair play to Twiglet. We saw him last season with Lexus. Really, you could have thought there would have been more in this championship for the Mercedes. And Twiglet is our last line here. He's the one holding the front lines for Mercedes AMG in the number 96. And it's a shame, because it's a fantastic machine. Really, what else is there to say about the Mercedes AMG? I mean, it features the 4-litre M178 AMG twin-turbo V8 engine. It makes north of 500 brake horsepower. Now, that's not to be confused with the M177 engine, which is, as a matter of fact, the engine used, if I can find it here, in the sister car, the... Whereabouts are you? Where are you? Aston Martin V8 Vantage. They use functionally the same engine, though one was made for export and the other one was made for the homegrown model. Let's just quickly see then with Twiglet. Out through the Virage de Bendor, turn 10, and the Virage de Galaban. Behind them as well, separated by a very, very small and thinning gap, is White Doctor and Just Boris. Aston Martin now into the lead of this race. Twiglet looks to be potentially calling it here for this lap on the pits. You can see Jolt sits in the middle, then the right-hand side of the track on what is a very short run-in. Almost Brands Hatch-esque there at this particular layout. But more importantly, we now see that leading this race is White Doctor. So back into the lead from pole. Had to spend the first half of this race looking up the tailpipes of the 999. Now it's the other way round with the number 54 leading. And as a matter of fact, out of Verrier gaining time to the Lamborghini. He already holds the fastest lap of this race, a jaw-dropping 1:53.825. What can White Doctor do now that he's out in front? He's not got the adage of slipstream. It is just him and the tarmac here for the next 22 minutes of the race. And out through turn 6, now makes turn 7 at Le Col on the exit of the Virage de la Sainte-Baume. Went down the Mistral straight. So let's see what straight line speed is talking between these two drivers. Will there be net loss or net gain at this distance for Just Boris? Predictions have it at net gain. Right now, though, it is dead stable between the pair of them. It's only a second dividing Aston Martin and Lamborghini. Right in the latter half here is where we get to see any pronounced changes in straight line speed. Now as we make turn 8, this is where the Lamborghini could gain time in the corners, and it does by only a tenth of a second. Loses it right back out, though, and nearly 3/10 out through the apex there of Le Bousset. A real push and pull. We find ourselves in a dangerously close concertina for the control of the race lead right now. I wouldn't necessarily classify this right now as the battle of the race lead, but it is the proceedings towards it. These are the first sort of cards being laid on the table here, and we'll see what kind of hands these drivers can deal later down the line. Just under 21 minutes left to go then. We'll be catching up with these two in a moment's time. Looking around the field then, to see where our next fights are coming from, it's still the story of Johansson v Abok. Tommy Johansson now back out in front of the number 27, the Aston Martin in 12th position, VSR Abok in 13th. Funky Fish in 10th position, 2.5 seconds behind the Porsche is GTR Twiglet, who we were watching on board with, the last of the AMGs, in 11th position. Funky Fish has made a remarkable comeback then after losing out quite a few positions since the race start. He's back into the top 10 in the number 982. A pity given the fact that on thoughts of what could have been, it could have been a much grander performance for Porsche today, especially given, as mentioned before, it's their second week in a row to be on primary benefit on balance of performance, having lost 10 kilos. Ferrari on screen at the moment, also in those negatives. Wishful Winnings has 5 less kilos than he did last weekend. Or last week, I should say. Very used to saying last weekend. Out through Virage de l'Hôtel. Then out through the Virage de la Sainte-Baume and Le Col. Down towards the Mistral straight we go then. On a lonely drive then for Wishful Winnings. It's been a story of paramount consistency for the number 23. He's been finding himself up in that top 5 on a multitude of occasions, and even onto the occasional podium like we saw in Monza, just off of the grit and consistency that comes with keeping your head low and trying not to be a hero over the course of an hour-long race. And it's been rewarding him with a car like Ferrari, because that thing has been very, very reliable to him right now. And he's got probably one of the best strategies for tyres and tyre longevity, even in the searing heat here in Le Castellet, minus that bit of understeer there. The Ferrari has been flawless to a fault on the Pirelli P0s. It's really been able to play a lot more conservatively than its contemporaries in the paddock. Ford right now in 4th position. This is the number 61 of the Blue Frog. Out past turn 13, the 835 of Tyler Vermaak. He's slowly reeling the South African talent into sight over the course of the last lap there. It's a 3.6 second margin. We'll see whether or not he can reel it down to 0 in the next 18.5 minutes of racing. Fellow Ford driver then, VSR Antion, we were watching with for quite some time. Still in the process of hunting down Otzi, but you can see it has not been an easy task to say the least. Over the course of the last lap, he's definitely been able to reel in a lot more time, being nearly a second and a half faster over the course of lap 20. Now as we enter lap 21, it's 1.5 seconds between himself and Otzi. And McLaren just keeps slipping away in the corners. He's been playing things a little carefully in this second half, hoping Otzi runs himself out of road. Maybe there is something we know that something we don't know that Otzi and Antion do. But we'll be getting on board with the race leaders at the moment. You can see it is very close between Just Boris and White Doctor. We're on board then with Boris for the battle of the race lead. Down to Le Busset we go, but he cuts it a little bit early there to the inside line. The Aston is going to surf it for a late apex. Boris still right with him though, angling for the inside at Bendor, and the Aston moves to cover him off so he can try and run for a late apex here. It's mind games aloof between Aston Martin and Lamborghini. Now bear in mind, Boris was duped on the strategy for today. He got served a blinder by the 54, but now when the two meet on track with only 17 minutes left to play for, who comes out on top? As we saw these two start along the front row, and it was Boris to a very early lead to this race. Can he return to what is a very late lead of the race once more? On our way down to the very same set of corners he solidified at the time before at Verrières. Turn 1 and 2. Aston Martin still ahead. White Doctor is going to have to hold on vehemently to this position here if he means to retain his hopes of a potential bid for Season 8's championship. Boris gunning for his second and first consecutive in VSR history. White Doctor looking for his first. So it's Just Boris looking for his second and consecutive. If I didn't say that already. Two-part names, easy to confuse, especially in a vacuum. Down to the Mistral Straight then we go. You can see trying to snip off some of that slipstream from the Lamborghini is the Aston. Now this is a 5.2 litre Audi V10 versus a 4 litre AMG V8 engine. Or more specifically looking at it here, yes, as a matter of fact, dead on 4 litres. Very nearly side by side again, then to the Curb de Sang. He's got a little bit of aero wash over the nose, but he's closer than he was the lap before to try and nose it on the inside here between himself and the Aston Martin. He's up past the apex on the inside. Is Just Boris, but taking it the long way around. At Le Busset is White Doctor to come and have a go to defend the position back once more at the Virage de Bendor at turn 10. They both wash out a little bit wide past the apex, then to Garlaban. He's back into the lead. 4 attempts, now 3, as we make our way to the Virage de la Tour at turn 12. It is dangerously close now. The final quarter of an hour dawns upon us here in round 10 of the championship, and it can go any which way in this fight between two. These two have shared in a fantastic chapter right now, and with a few more weeks before the season conclusion, it is still massively up in the air onto who comes out on top. Now bear in mind, if Boris does go on to win this race, he will continue to slim the margin down, but not enough to take the lead in this round. But he may have a better opportunity in Valencia, especially on the rumours that White Doctor could be missing out. So down into the Virage de l'Hotel at turns 3 and 4, very nearly to the inside. He is trying area denial now tactics against the Aston Martin, trying to snip off as much momentum as possible, knowing that Sector 3 is his to play. As we're out through Sector 1, heading to Sector 2, wider on the exit there of turn 6, now turn 7. He's conserving as much speed as he can. V8 versus V10, and closer than it was on the last 2 laps. This could be the proceedings of an overtake on our hands here for Just Boris. As he tries for it now, he's going to go alongside. Will he be ahead of the Aston Martin by the time we hit the Curb de Sang? He's now in the side draft, getting slowed down ever so slightly. Very nearly wheel rubbing, as a matter of fact. Was a bit of a bump and scrape, and another scrape there. Almost into the wall for the Aston Martin. Oh my goodness gracious me. Still side by side at the Curb de Sang, turn 8, then to Le Busset at turn 9. Aston Martin back out in front, Lamborghini attacking for the inside. Doesn't get it in at that point. Very nearly snips himself over the curb. Back on the inside though, past the apex, very nearly clashed across the front on our way to the Virage de Bendor. Not happy, you can see there flashing the Aston. Signs of discontent there for the 999. That bump down the Mistral Straight, that could have gone very, very wrong. We've already seen what bumps down straights can do to you back in Monza. We don't need a repeat. Out of the Virage du Pont, turn 13, and this is a vehement fight for the lead of this race. Fierce, white-knuckle stuff between Lamborghini and Aston Martin's Just Boris and White Doctor. The story of Season 8's championship is not one spoken about in a whisper or a murmur. It sings loud and it sings proud, because it is a clash of the titans here between White Doctor and Just Boris. Who would have thought a track like Paul Ricard, no offence to it, would have provided such an ample playground for such a cinematic fight for championship deciding positions here? Or what will go on to inspire championship deciding positions, as mentioned before. Right now, though, this is far from over. We've only seen 3 minutes of what is 12 left in the race. And now he tried around the outside. He was going to look, you can see, holding the right-hand side of the track. But he's having, sadly, to sort of feed into the palm of White Doctor's hand here. He's not going to get the inside at turn 8. He's actually going to be even further back, but he's going to have to try for something Alonso-esque here, out through the Curb de Sang, but he's just stuck in behind the Aston. It makes a very difficult back end to follow, and you can see he's closing him off there. But is that a little bit too big a bite for White Doctor as side by side past the apex? Just Boris looks to potentially be up into the lead by the time we get to turn 10. Here comes the Aston though on the inside. On our way at turn 10 here at Virage de Bendor, then to Garlaban. It's Aston Martin back up into the lead. Lamborghini though right alongside him will be to the outside at Virage de la Tour. It can go any which way, and whose way does it go? As we head to turn 12, it could be White Doctor, but as we head to turn 13, Boris has a go on the inside at the Virage du Pont. Aston holding around the outside, takes a little bit of a slip off the track, and it's Boris up into the lead of the race. Unbelievable stuff here. Proper elbows out between Aston Martin and Lamborghini. Now up into the lead of the race though, 11 minutes left to go. The Requiem knell rings for the 999, as now we're in the final chapter of fighting here in Le Castellet. Washing out through Le Verrières, very nearly into a crash, goes Just Boris, and that gives White Doctor the lead of the race once more. Swapping hands there over the course of half a lap is it's absolutely ecstatic performances. Now Virage du Camp, very close between the pair of them again. Number 96 in trouble, and that does, as a matter of fact, bring out the yellow flags. And back into the pit lane goes the 96. I believe that's GTR Twiglet's Mercedes had trouble out of turn 8 at the Curb de Sang, and then turn 9 between that and Le Bousset. Down the Mistral straight as we're back in the green flag conditions. It is so close now. An unprecedented fight for the lead between White Doctor and Just Boris. And again, trying for around the outside. Is it third time's the charm for Lamborghini out through turn 8? No, back in behind Aston Martin. You can see the slow burn for the pangs of frustration of that 999. He has really met his match here in terms of a defensive performance by White Doctor. Has absolutely stumped him. I don't believe in the time that he's been racing, Boris has been given as rigorous a thrashing here for position without it going nuclear, without it ending up in an incident. These two are at the absolute apex of their ability here in Le Castellet, and it is a sight to behold. 9 minutes left to go. Out of turn 13, you can see the Aston has a little bit more shove on the corner exit. That owes to the fact it's got those twin turbos on that AMG V8. Lamborghini running things naturally aspirated on their 5.2 litre Audi co-engineered V10 engine. Down towards Verrières, tried a very early move towards the inside, and that is, I'll say, very confusing indeed. Now, it maybe could just be the cameras giving us a bit of a poor angle of it, but surely that would end up tarnishing your momentum more so than benefiting it. But oh well, he's still right with him on our way to the Virage de l'Hôtel and Virage de Camp. And it's just this omnipresent performance in the Sector 1 that Boris has got here to keep the Aston Martin in range. Once we head out of Le Col at turn 7, down the Mistral straight, and this is the action zone. He has been trying at every beck and call for the last I think, about 3 or 4 laps now, as a matter of fact. He's been trying his luck here at this section of the track. He's a little further away than he was the lap before. Is that going to be any sign of success on the horizon? You can see he is pretty close, and alongside there we have the Aston Martin, but still to the outside. It's a little bit of contact between the pair of them. That can't be going particularly well. Out through turn 8 we go. It's still side by side between White Doctor and Just Boris. Down towards the... oh no, it's through Le Bousset. Side by side and then sideways for Aston Martin's White Doctor. Boris to the inside. It's contact a second time. It's disaster between the leading duo. What on earth is going on between the front row? This is where it's all gone nuclear. Boris has thrown the towel in after the contact at Le Bousset. Just Boris is throwing it in. The 999 has stopped on track. It's at the end for Lamborghini. Oh, no. What on earth is going on here? He's back out on track now. Definitely not in the stead to fight for the race lead. As a matter of fact, he may have to try and fight off fight for 4th position from 5th. Oh, no. This has gone horribly wrong for Just Boris. He had absolute pay dirt in Monza, but that one incident has spelt doom for his chances of a race win today at the circuit Paul Ricard. A nuclear incident. I did say it is shocking to have seen things go on this long without an incident, but right now that has given rise to an Aston Martin 1-2 finish here in France, and I must say that is remarkable to see such a sight. As a proud Aston Martin fan, it really does bring a tear to my eye. Now, we must obviously pay respects to the fact that was a major incident between the pair of them. I'm not entirely sure what's gone on there. The stewards are going to be having a very fun time. But even if Boris can appeal that and take away the victory from White Doctor, it will fall firmly into the hands of fellow Aston Martin Tyler Vermaak in the 835. Aston Martin will be laughing all the way to the bank here in the next 6 minutes if they can hold their ground from Ford and Lamborghini behind them in the top 4. But that is going to be a bit controversial. We spoke about rivalries earlier in this broadcast and we likened it to your Hamilton and Verstappen, and well, Silverstone 2021 it seems to be pretty familiar right now, even though we're at Le Castellet. Looking around the track then, see Wishful Winnings chasing Just Boris. Now, that incident didn't look necessarily strong enough to cause any untoward front aero damage. It definitely is going to do a lot in damaging his temper, which we've seen quite a few times from Just Boris in these incidents. It does tend to have a bit of an effect on the driver more so than the machine. Wishful Winnings has just got to keep his head low like he did back in Monza, and it could be another free position on the horizon here. 5 minutes left to go. It is pretty close. We'll be keeping a close eye on what goes on here between the 23 and the 999 before the checkered flag. Let's get a look around the track though and see what's going on here with our drivers out on the circuit. Looking around the field, I mean, you can see the overall standing order there. White Doctor, Tyler Vermaak and Blue Frog on podium. Just Boris with the fastest lap in 4th position. Wishful Winnings in the top 5. VSR Antion in 6th. VSR Otzi 7th. VSR Grizz 8th. Audi Pete 9th. And Funky Fish in 10th. Johansson 12th. VSR Abok Johansson 11th. VSR Abok 12th. Chris 13th. And Shawnee back in 14th position. 4 minutes left to go then. 4.5 if you want to get precise. And things are looking to shape up rather interestingly, especially in whatever goes on post-race there at the investigation by the stewards. Now, one driver I want to point out as well has had a very solid race today is Tyler Vermaak. Now, amongst the incidents that he had in the last couple of races, he sits dangerously close to a qualifying ban, but the South African in the 835 has made mincemeat of today's racing endeavour, giving Aston Martin what could be their first 1-2 finish here in VSR. Part of that deal with White Doctor on the front row here with 4 minutes left to go. It's going to be a solid tenure of points to put him up ahead of Blue Frog behind him and potentially up to 3rd in the championship for gold. Getting a look at those gold standings as well, you can see it's joint 3rd for Soviet Mario and Blue Frog. Soviet not participating in today's race will automatically lose out heading into rounds 11 and 12. You can see it's mostly right now the fight between Blue Frog and Tyler Vermaak. It's a 5-point gap between the pair of them. And with Vermaak up in front, it could slim that gap down, if not neutralise it, on our way to Valencia next week. 3.5 minutes then left to go on what has been a very controversial second half to today's race. Let's get back on board with some of the drivers around the track here. Blue Frog has to clear a 3.7 second gap to catch Tyler Vermack before the end of this race. In the last lap gone, he was only a tenth faster in the Ford. Not that I think he'll be arguing particularly with a podium finish. That is a very solid bit of points there in the bank, really, for Ford and for Blue Frog. But as mentioned, it is definitely going to be the biggest worry of all, is losing out third in the championship, especially when he stood shoulder to shoulder with one driver all ready for it. He doesn't want to see a new driver just enter from behind and take the position off of him in the championship. So I do expect to see these two get closer, potentially even by the end of the race. If not, as we head into Valencia next week, could be interesting to watch in those podium fights for the Gold Championship, just as much so as it is for the lead. Very, very hot day out, both on track and in real life as well. We've had the air conditioner running all day. Very, very hot out. Very, very, very hot out. And same reflected on track here, searing heat. Those tyres have really been through the ringer. Really, really. And I think that's could be part and parcel of what's given Aston Martin such a spring in their step today. To be put in such solid stead for this race in particular, not only does it owe to the fact that White Doctor fought tooth and nail for that, admittedly, things got a little bit sour in this section of the track, make no mistake of that. That is not to detract from what he has been able to do today in that 54. It could be another race win on the horizon then, as we're amongst the final laps of racing today here at the circuit Paul Ricard. Taking a look around the field, it could be the proceedings for an Aston Martin 1-2. What a glorious sight indeed. On thoughts of what could have been a better race today, I should say, for VSR Chris. He will finish today's race by the looks of things potentially in 12th, though he looks to be fighting with fellow Aston Martin Tommy Johansson for 11th position before the checkered flag. Looking around the field, though, looks to be another solid top 5 for Wishful Winnings. Just Boris there, 2.5 seconds up the field from him, looking to finish 4th in this race. To give you some perspective of what happened after that incident when we were playing the replay, what we saw on our live monitor was the Lamborghini stopped at the side of the road for a solid 15 to 20 seconds there before getting going again. And all of that time there had to have been the signs of just pure frustration for Just Boris. And there's always next week there, but that championship standings remains lively heading into Valencia. If White Doctor doesn't make an appearance, it'll be absolute pay dirt with double the points on offer. But for White Doctor at the moment, he's done the best that he could against the circumstances here to keep the lively lead of the championship. But for how much longer, if we're led to believe that he'll be taking another hiatus next Wednesday? Let's stay on board then into the final sector of the track with today's race leader and soon-to-be race winner, White Doctor. We must pick up on the fact as well, in terms of previous wins, this will be White Doctor's career 3rd here in VSR. And with not much left to go in terms of the time today here into the final sector as the laps tick over. We're on the final lap of racing here in round 10 of the championship on what has been an exhilarating round today, full of battles, full of controversy and full of drama, but full of glory is it for Aston Martin, as taking the checkered flag on his career 3rd, winning round 10 of the championship is White Doctor in the number 54. A glorious sight then for Aston Martin fans worldwide. A 1-2 finish as Tyler Vermack takes the checkered flag for 2nd place in the 835. What a sight to behold then. Aston Martin 1-2 finish. Ford in 3rd there, courtesy of the 61. We'll get a full rundown of the finishing order in a moment's time. What an interesting race then. A pleasant surprise given the polarising nature of Paul Ricard to give us such a vibrant and juicy round to discuss, especially in what will soon become the fabled history of Season 8. Very, very bizarre stuff indeed. Across the line then, VSR Antion in the top 10 had a very exhilarating performance in the number 1. We can see the inklings of his drive to gold potentially by Season 9 as one likely candidate outside of the automatic upgrade the Silver Championship winners will get. That could either be Otzi or Grizz. But Otzi right now finishing ahead of Grizz could swing the Silver Championship back in favour of McLaren heading to the next 2 rounds at the last of the sprint rounds this season. Getting a look at the calendar very quickly, you can see we'll be in the Circuit Riccardo Tormo next for our last sprint round. Double the amount of points on offer, and that's double the opportunities for things to get very interesting indeed. So we'll get the full rundown of results here. We're waiting for our last couple of cars. The number 28 there, VSR Chris across the line ahead of Tommy Johansson, then makes 11th position for Aston Martin, as well as 12th there for Tommy Johansson in the Aston Martin number 71. Across the line then goes the number 27 to make the last of our cars across the line today. And there you have the final results. White Doctor wins in Le Castellet, makes an Aston Martin 1-2. Tyler Vermack second, the Blue Frog in third with Ford. Just Boris, a reluctant P4, but ahead of Wishful Winnings, who makes another top 5 appearance, his 3rd in a row, if I'm not mistaken, as well, in the last fortnight of racing. VSR Antion then 6th, makes all Fords inside the top 10, a grand sight for the Blue Oval. VSR Otzi in 7th position ahead of championship rival VSR Grizz. It could swing things for McLaren heading into Valencia for the Silver Championship lead. Audi Pete in 9th position, Funky Fish 10th, Chris 11th, Tommy Johansson 12th, VSR Abok 13th and Shawnee Mac 14th. 2 DNFs from Elite Cassie and GTR Twiglet. What a race indeed. A controversial career 3rd or so we're led to believe right now for White Doctor. I do not envy the job of the stewards today, having to try and investigate what on God's green earth happened down at Le Bousset. That's not our responsibility here on TRTN, we just show you the video. That's all from us though on TRTN, and what a delightful little race we've had here in Le Castellet. I think this is a sign as ever for most leagues. Don't be too afraid of the Circuit Paul Ricard. It is a grand little circuit and has plenty of surprises and tricks up its sleeve. Definitely do give it a consider on the championship calendar if you haven't already. But that's all from us here on TRTN. Very well done today to our drivers. And as for driver of the day, it's a tough one, but I would say Blue Frog could be a likely candidate there. A very solid run up to 3rd. Tyler Vermack as well started from the 2nd row and is up to the front in the race. It's a tough one to pick out. It's very tough. Very, very tough indeed. I would say definitively, so we don't have to throw it to a vote, the number 61, I would say. A very solid performance by Blue Frog. Kept his head low, much like how Wishful Winnings does in the Ferrari. And that Ford has just been a proper solid bit of kit round Le Castellet. He's done very, very well there for another podium appearance in this championship. That's all from us, though, on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your evening on very nice summery conditions for the week ahead here in the UK. We'll see you later. Good night.